audio.
I'm going to go ahead and set up the broadcast for Facebook.
Okay, and let us know before you go live so we know what's happening. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Caroline Griffith. I don't know, I know you.
You will after this.
Oh, good, thank you.
I will be your moderator for this evening.
Oh, thanks.
And so we were just going over how all of this is going to work. So one thing that you can do right now, Paul, is hide non-video participants. So you just see the folks who are going to be answering questions. I don't know if you're familiar with that. You probably do a lot of Zooming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, yeah. Okay. It's not in my way. I mean, do I need to close that?
Yeah, I think that you're fine.
Yeah.
So we are going to, the format for this evening is that we're going to rotate who answers questions. We're just going to jump right into it. And we have videos of different people asking the questions. So you'll hear the video. I will announce who's going to start us out, and you will have a minute to answer the question. Colin Fisk, our handy timekeeper, will be telling us when the time is up. One thing that I noticed last week when we were doing the Eureka City Council Forum is it seemed like some people were actually timing themselves because they were like spot on and ending at a minute. So if you're that sort of person, that is also an option for you too, to set your own little timer on your phone or whatever.
Is there going to be, because in the last forum they let us know when there was like 10 seconds left, is that going to be a thing that happens, or is it just going to be you have a minute and go for it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. What, you have a minute? Or
you have a minute and go for it.
Okay, no signals from you.
No, because we haven't really quite figured out the best way to make those signals happen through this technology. Whether that's like holding something up, we don't all see each other all the time. So you will hear the timer.
Caroline, the title of this video is Arcata Candidates Forum.
Yep.
Candidate Forum, and a mini blurb.
10 candidates for Arcata City Council answer questions from local community groups. Oh, yeah.
Arcata City Council candidates answer questions.
Perfect. And I don't know if folks can see, we do have our technicians, our lovely tech person, Fletch, the phone number in the chat, if you can see that, just in case you do have any sort of tech issues.
Okay, we're going live, everyone.
Do we need to wait a moment or?
Yes, I'll give you a chat cue when it's up.
Fantastic. Hello and welcome. Good evening. Thank you for joining us on this Arcata City Council Candidate Forum. My name is Caroline Griffith and I will be the moderator this evening. First, before we even get started, I want to acknowledge that the area in question and where we're all standing is traditional Wiyot territory, and give thanks for being able to live on this land that has been stewarded since time immemorial by the Wiyot people. And one way that we can give thanks is by paying an honor tax, which is a way of recognizing and respecting the sovereignty of Native nations and implementing the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. The honor tax is a tax out of respect for Native sovereignty, and you can learn more at honortax.org and also find really handy maps to learn whose land you're living on if you happen to not be here on Wiyot territory with us. And this forum this evening is sponsored by the Eureka chapter of the NAACP, Central del Pueblo, Humboldt County Transition Age Youth Collaborative, Humboldt Area Center for Harm Reduction, Affordable Homeless Housing Alternatives, the North Coast Environmental Center, the North Coast People's Alliance, the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities, Cooperation Humboldt, the Humboldt Del Norte Central Labor Council, Healthcare for All Humboldt and Physicians for a National Health Program, Move to Amend, and 350 Humboldt. And I do want to give a very special thanks to the Eureka chapter of the NAACP. They have been providing us with technology and the people to help us use it as we kind of navigate this crazy time. And we do also have Spanish interpretation this evening, which the NAACP has been kind enough to provide for us. And we do try to make it a priority to have that at these events, just to make sure that we are working to welcome all of our community members into these processes. And all of these groups have been collaborating on forums like this and on other projects because not only do our missions overlap, but we also have a shared interest in fostering communities in which all voices are heard and listened to. And so that is why we're here this evening. So we have all 10 candidates for the Arcata City Council here tonight to answer questions from all these groups. And the way that this forum is going to work, because we do have a lot of questions and a lot of candidates, you only get 1 minute each to answer these questions, which isn't a lot, but you do have the entire rest of your campaigns to address these questions with the voters. And I would encourage anybody who's watching, if you do have questions, to reach out to all of these folks. They are accessible, and figure out how you can get your questions answered. We do have a fabulous timekeeper for this evening who will be holding the clock and keeping us all at 1 minute. So you need to listen closely. You'll probably hear the timer, but if you don't, I will kindly let you know that your time is up. And so first we want to go through and introduce all of the candidates and I want to thank you all for showing up this evening for this, and also for applying for this job, because that is essentially what you're doing, is applying to be an employee of the people of Arcata. So first of all, thank you for stepping up to do that. So you can just give a little wave when I say your name. This evening we have Emily Grace Goldstein, Camilla Zapata, Nick Matthews, Stacy Atkins Salazar, Sarah Shafer, Paul Patino, Colin Yeo, Orion Peterson Jones, Kimberly White, and Michael Winkler. So thank you all for coming, and we can jump right in. Our first question is from the Eureka chapter of the NAACP.
Good evening, my name is Sharon Blank. I'm the president of the Eureka NAACP. The question I have for the candidates this evening is, what concrete changes would you make to policing policies for the Eureka Police Department to make?
You have to go over to the Arcata tab. Sorry, folks. As I said, we're all learning this new technology, so I appreciate your patience as we figure it all out. And if need be, tech, if you can't get to it, I could always read the question. Okay. So the question from the NAACP is, do you think systemic racism plays a factor in policing in Arcata? Please answer yes or no and give some details. And we'll start this question off with Emily Grace Goldstein.
Hi, thank you for the question. I think that Absolutely, it does. Unfortunately, I think that anytime we are talking about policing a population, we have to be aware of the ways that folks are seen by people in power through a systemic biases. And this includes, of course, systemic racism. When somebody is being approached for whatever they are doing, whether it's a traffic stop, they're walking around the plaza and the police think they look suspicious, whatever it is, they will always be seen through that bias lens unless we do the hard work to undo that. And unfortunately, a lot of research has shown that racial bias training doesn't always work with police. And so I think even in Arcata, although we like to think it doesn't play a role, systemic racism does play a role in policing.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Camilla Zapata.
That's a great question to ask. I think that no matter what, systemic racism is always going to play a role in any town, any police department, until we really all take a moment to sit down and reassess things that have been taught to us, things that we've been learned through osmosis. And I really think that I agree with Emily Grace Goldstein that even if there is training provided, I still don't know that that would eradicate it entirely. I think it's up to each individual in our community to take the time to sit down with other communities outside of themselves and to listen, to attend NAACP meetings and just listen to anecdotal stories of each person and try to put yourself in someone else's shoes instead of, I guess, ignoring the fact that we see color and it's unavoidable. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Nick Matthews.
Well, I agree with both of them. Actually, I do feel that it's something that is probably prevalent in most of the police departments in our country right now. I feel that there's a certain amount of bias, I'm sure. I believe that it's necessary for a little bit more training and that kind of stuff, and perhaps a few adding a few more colored police officers into our force that can allow for education to others, and really just to move forward and try and educate all of our people and stand to a higher standard. Thank you.
Stacy Atkins Salazar. Stacy, you're muted.
Sorry, yeah, technical difficulty there. Well, unfortunately, systemic racism is in, I believe, every police department. It's just, it's been built in. That's why it's systemic. I would like to think that Arcata is different, but those aren't the reports or the stories that I've heard. I know that our department is making a concerted effort to be better and do better, and that our police chief is very much in favor of reform. And so I think that's a great sign for our community that it seems like we all are on the same page on some different levels. And I think because it's unavoidable, some things that we can do to help while we're working on cleaning up the system would be oversight, citizens oversight committees, body cams, cameras on cars, just ways for the citizens to police our police.
Thank you. Sarah Shafer.
Yes, systemic racism exists in our society and exists in our policing institutions as a fact. I'm a high school history teacher, so I know well the history of systemic racism in our country and the fact that policing inherently is a racist institution and was founded that way intentionally. Especially in Humboldt County, we can look back. We have a very old police department that has existed for a long time and has a history of violence towards Indigenous communities, and also just looking at historically how heavily policed areas in Arcata are often the communities that Black and Brown people are living in. And so as a fact, I mean, we see racism in our policing every day just because of the fact that those communities are over policed, such as Valley West, Valley East, parts of Arcata that are, you know, people of minorities, people of color living in these communities. And so, I mean, we need to act as a community to be anti-racist and, you know, teach our police department to work with that and have community outreach to be anti-racist within our communities.
Thank you, Sarah. Paul Patino?
Yeah, systemic racism is part of the system of PD, schools, you name it. The United States has always been involved in systemic racism. And so when we talk about it, I like to look at details. And one of the details that I like to look at is, what does our force look like? What are our cops like? Have I met every one of them? Have I ridden around with them? Are we hiring more people of color, and especially hiring more women? We're in a town that's probably 60% women, and we've only got 2 or 3 women PD. It should be 50-50 at least, or 60%. Anyways, I think the Citizen Oversight Committee is a great place to start controlling the police. If you don't have that, who's going to look at them in detail? Thank you.
The system is working. Colin Yo.
Yeah, so American policing is inherently a racist institution. It always has been. In my opinion, I don't think it's really necessarily reformable. It's kind of the elephant in the room. Everyone talks about reform, and it's like, how do you reform the slave catchers? Because that's essentially what this whole thing started with. I think that the whole system needs to be rewired bottom up. I think that we live in a white supremacist society, and in the 21st century, that's unforgivable. And I think the police are a major part of that here and elsewhere, and particularly in wake of the recent Breonna Taylor grand jury investigation, findings. It's like, what do you do? How do you reform that? I think it's something that I'm sort of in an opinion, like, we need to start fresh. We need to just start fresh. Like, this country is inherently deeply flawed, and that's one of our most flawed institutions, is policing.
Thank you, Colin. Orion Peterson Jones.
Well, I agree with Colin. I think that we need to not just reform, but kind of gut it and start over, start a brand new system. Racism is, of course, inherent in the police department, in every police department, and in our government and in our system. And so what can we actually do to kind of counter that? I mean, the idea of a citizens oversight committee is a great idea, but who is actually on that committee? It needs to be represented by all groups. People of color, indigenous voices must be heard. Not only do we need to recruit people, we also need to promote those people as well. I would say we need to have lots of voices on that citizens committee, but also in the department as well. We also need to stop over policing. I think that's a big thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Kimberly White.
Hi. So I think we all would like to think, because we live in Arcata and we're progressive, that we live in this idyllic community that just, we don't have racism. Unfortunately, that's not true. Systemic racism, as other candidates have stated, exists inherently in our community, within our public safety realm. I do disagree with a couple of the candidates of saying there's just no chance for reform. I have to believe that there is chance for reform. Otherwise, there just isn't any hope. I think that first what we need to do is acknowledge that we all have inherent bias, even those of us who are of color. We need to acknowledge this, and that's the way that we can keep that conversation going. I think many would say all we have to do is look to the Josiah Lawson case, and we can see that we do have systemic racism in our own community. Some ways that we can look at reform, as another candidate stated, was that we need to look closely at our public safety committee and make sure that we have diversity. Ongoing training with APD. I think they're up for the challenge, and I think my time is up.
That's time. Yep. And Michael Winkler.
Well, we have a history of systemic racism within our society, but that means that we need to work to counter it. That as the mayor and as on the city council, that we have formed the public safety committee and encouraged a wide variety of people to join. We've adopted the 8 Can't Wait and Project Zero, and adopted Police Foundation report, neighborhood policing, community policing. And so we need to work to counter the inherent racism which in our society. I think we can be reformed, but we need some major changes, and we're actively working on them as a member of the city council. And if with new members of the council, I would welcome to join that effort.
Thank you. And our next question of the evening comes from Central del Pueblo.
Hello, my name is Octavio Acosta, and I am with Centro del Pueblo. Our question is, undocumented members of our society, like all other members, have experienced the psychological, economic, and health effects of the pandemic this year. Additionally, we also pay the taxes that all community members pay as far as labor and sales taxes. However, we cannot rely on the safety nets such as unemployment benefits and the emergency stipend check that came in that the US government provides to all other documented citizens. Now, the pandemic, coupled with the standard racialized violence from members of the white community that seem to be justified by many local and federal agents of government, have put the undocumented community in Humboldt County in challenging times. How do you see yourself using your political platform to incorporate the voices, the worries, stories of experienced violence, labor and renter rights violation, the dreams and the solutions, and performing the necessary actions, campaigns towards social justice and equity of the undocumented Latinx Southern Indigenous community? How will you hold yourself accountable and accessible to our community needs? Thank you very much.
All right. And for that question, we're going to start with Camilla Zapata.
I believe whether documented or not, people deserve the support that we all do in order to live a quality life. In Arcata, being a sanctuary city, it is important for each person to know that they can reach out to people within our local government to be put into contact with resources we have, whether it be food, shelter, jobs, you name it, anything that we have at our fingertips, we should be providing, and there should be no power distance. There should be no barrier to entry or communication between local government workers and anybody in need. I believe that the English language services should be used to connect the Latinx and immigrant community. And I more recently saw the City of Arcata's Instagram page, including Spanish now, which I think is a great way to start the government outreach, but it needs to be expanded to all platforms.
Thank you. Nick Matthews.
This is a fabulous question. I feel that there's a variety of ways that we can go forward and try and help with this issue. Obviously, the pandemic has been devastating to all of us, but especially in undocumented people, because simply the economy hasn't allowed for them to get employment and make money as much as other people have been able to. There's, I think we should increase the city services accessible. We should go forward with helping with documentation. It should be streamlined a little bit. It shouldn't be so difficult to go that way. I feel that we need to stress the services that are available. There are food for people, legislative services, legal services that aren't able to be used in the undocumented community. And so it's there's a lot of room for work there for sure. Thank you.
Stacy Atkins Salazar.
So I think the last part of the question, how would we hold ourselves accountable and accessible to the Latinx community? We need to be accountable and accessible to every part of our community. So of course, I will have an open door, an open ear, and actively pursuing those communities that I find might be marginalized or underserved. As a council person, It's my job to listen, but also to actively seek out those communities. And I think we've done a great start by declaring ourselves a sanctuary city, but then to help people with the resources, encourage them that it's safe to reach out and that they can ask questions, so that they have access to resources. And quite frankly, when our federal government fails to stand up for these people, it is our job in our town to protect our community and stand up for them.
Thank you. Sarah Shafer.
Primero, gracias por su pregunta, Octavio, y es una muy importante. We need to focus on helping undocumented workers, and we need to focus on the fact that nobody is illegal on stolen land. We need to work with organizations locally, such as Centro del Pueblo, to provide services and to become really clear on the needs of these communities, whether that be housing, whether that be just extra financial support as a community coming together to be able to offer that, offer grants for, because we are a sanctuary city, offer grants for families that are facing homelessness or food insecurity within these communities. And we just need to really become clear on these needs, and working together as a community. I am ready to have an open ear and listen to the needs of these communities, because they are essential and they are vital to our economy locally. And we need to work with these people to be clear on what they need to thrive in this community and what we can give back to them.
Thank you. Paul Patino.
Yeah. For me, when I look at undocumented people, I have to say, well, what really can I do for them as a city councilman? I think we could work together with the county and figure out a way for undocumented people to actually have an application process that's safe and secure, so they're not caught trying to ask for help and sent back by ICE. I think that one concrete thing we could do is build farm worker housing in Arcata for all the workers at Sun Valley Farm, especially those that drive to Fortuna and back every day, and Eureka. And it's a thought I've had that, you know, we have this giant community that works at Sun Valley that has to commute, generally because Arcata prices are too high. It would be a benefit to the city and to the people to have that housing. Thanks.
Thank you. Colin Yo.
My entire adult life, the federal government has brutalized immigrants in this country, particularly those of color, particularly those from Latinx backgrounds. My grandparents were immigrants. They just happened to come from Canada at a time when the rules were be white and show up. And I think, frankly, that is unacceptable to continue into the future like that. As far as what we can do on a local level, we need to engender trust among undocumented people in the local government. We need to let them know that we're not going to turn them into the modern Gestapo that is the ICE. And ICE has no place in Arcata, in my opinion. I think that it's an abomination and it should be ended as an institution. So giving them resources that they probably don't have, give them resources to, blow the whistle on if they have abusive labor relations. That's really important too, because a lot of people take advantage of these people because they're not documented. And these are people in our community who are taking those advantages. And we really need to shore that up, and we need to really show respect and support for these people.
Yeah, it's time. Orion Peterson-Jones.
Undocumented or not, immigration status should never determine who has a right to basic human protections. I would stress the resources and services that are already available in our community for food and for shelter, medical, clothing, employment, education. And I would strive to continue improving upon these systems that are already in place. I would also urge the creation of new programs and try to integrate and build bridges with the existing programs. I also agree in delivering equity through arts and culture, which nourishes the soul of communities. I think that we should be sensitive to the importance of privacy, but most important, I think that we need to be accessible. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly White.
So we are a sanctuary city, and I think that we need to be more than words, we need to have action. And so while our federal government may have ideas, I feel like Arcata should have a different, we need to have access for everyone. These are basic human rights, whether you're documented or undocumented. So things like unemployment insurance, we need to have a backup plan. We need to have funds for the city of Arcata community. So if you fall into that realm where you can't have access to unemployment insurance or any other basic human right, then we can facilitate that. People are afraid, and rightfully so. I have friends and neighbors that are afraid to step up when there are injustices because they're afraid of being deported. You know, our whole country has been founded on give me your tired, give me your poor. We have been built upon immigration, and our current administration, of course, has torn all of that apart. I'd like to be set aside from the rest.
That's time. Michael Winkler.
As a member of the Arcata City Council, I supported forbidding city employees from asking immigration status, and very proud of that, that the city should have no involvement with ICE or with immigration. That for the last 10 years, I've been involved with affordable housing professionally. Many of those housing units have gone to people who are undocumented and who are Spanish speakers. And I've also been involved with our Arcata House Partnership, which provides services to people who are undocumented. And I'm proud that I supported the eviction moratorium so that people who cannot pay their rent are not being evicted. And one of the things I've worked on also is farm worker housing, not in this area, but in other parts of the state, specifically in the Sacramento area. And so those are things I'm very proud of. I'm also proud that Arcata is reaching out to Valley West, which has a large Latinx community, and that we're increasingly putting our website in Spanish.
That's time. And Emily Grace Goldstein.
Well, I've actually had the privilege of meeting with Octavio and talking about this issue, so I'm really happy to have this question. I think the really important part is, what would I do? What's my personal power as a politician, somebody who's elected to the city? And I think that being accessible and being open is one thing, but understanding that, especially as a white person and a white person who would be on city council, I represent something that's terrifying to a community that has been extremely oppressed. And so finding a way to be accessible without being over imposing, not forcing myself into that community, but being there to listen and making those connections and bridges with building trust, because everything comes from a place of building trust with community. You can't just be assumed to be a safe person. That's something that's earned. From a policy standpoint, I think that this connects perfectly to our first question about policing and systemic racism. Yes, we are a sanctuary city. That doesn't mean people aren't being targeted based on the color of their skin or what they look like. So I think the way that we protect the people in our community is really important.
Thank you. And our next question, it comes from the Humboldt County Transition Age Youth Collaborative and Humboldt Area Center for Harm Reduction. Do we got a video tech?
I'm Alexis. I'm a Youth Advocacy Board member of H.E. Stacy, the Humboldt County Youth Collaboration. And the question I am asking is from H.E. Stacy, Hatcher, which is Humboldt Area Center for Harm Reduction, and Defund Humboldt Police Group. We are looking for elected leaders who focus on creating a structure of care and compassion that requires us to envision what a healthy community looks like. We are looking for someone who ensures that resources and processes are molded to fit the different aspects of the community, as opposed to our current one-size-fits-all approach. With that vision in mind, how would the city budget reflect this? Will this involve supporting harm reduction resources through Hatchet? Does this include supporting reallocation of any portion of police funding or repurposing the new juvenile hall being built?
And we will start off with Nick Matthews this round.
Her question didn't come through really clearly for me on mine, but I would like to respond to it. Obviously, we have to have compassion for all walks of life, especially in this situation. We have to focus on making sure that we have community-based solutions, different sorts of on a personal level. I feel that I've worked with a variety of customers of mine who've had mental issues that were wonderful, and it was wonderful to work with them. We have to work on our harm reduction, needle exchange programs, that kind of stuff, youth-driven programs as well. So yeah, that's. Thank you so much.
Great. Stacy, Atkins, Salazar.
So harm reduction is just one of the first steps in helping people to manage their care. And it's an important first step because it's at a very basic level of trying to keep people alive. And that's important. And then from there, we need to take it and work on healing the whole person. So I'm, very much in favor of that. And I think just using care and compassion in the ways that we treat people that need help is important. And as far as budgeting, I definitely think that we have room to wiggle with our money. We are rethinking how we're reimagining the police department. And a big part of that to me is adding social services. So this is another level of adding a social service. And we are so deprived of social services in Humboldt County that we definitely need to put more of our funds towards this.
Thank you. Sarah Shafer.
I definitely think that there needs to be a reallocation of money from the public safety department, from the policing department, into support for mental health care and for drug addiction and recovery. The opioid crisis has devastated Humboldt County just like it has all across the country. And needle exchange is a proven way to reduce disease, reduce the sharing of needles that cause things like AIDS and hepatitis and everything like that. And so it's proven that can reduce harm in a community. And that is really the first step in getting people services that they need and kind of opening that door to make contact with people that are experiencing drug addiction. Also, there was kind of multiple parts to this question, and looking at the youth outreach aspect as well. I think that it's really important to recognize that the police department does offer a really great juvenile diversion program in Arcata that is really important in using restorative practices to students that have had problems with getting in trouble at school, with probably maybe using drugs, anything like that, and being able to kind of reintegrate them into the community through restorative practices and not just send them down to the jail and lock them up in juvenile hall.
I hear the timer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Paul Patino.
Yeah, I support having a kiosk for a needle exchange, or at least a needle drop-off. And in a public place, someplace where you can get to it, probably up by the Portland Loo or outside of City Hall. At least the needles can be dropped there. They can stay out of our trash. I do support the idea of Hatcher, and I think that the possible breakdown may have been not being exactly one-to-one. I think people understand that a little bit better when you trade a bad needle for a good one. So I would support that in Arcata in a one-to-one exchange also. And as somebody mentioned that our youth diversion officers, I think we could stand to beef that up with more social work background, or let's say somebody just as a social worker, not a youth diversion officer. So I think we can add that into that department that we have.
And that's
I didn't hear.
That was time.
Oh, I didn't hear it. Sorry.
Okay, it's hard to hear it. So that's why I'm here to be the secondary timer.
Sure.
Colin, yo.
Yeah, I support Hatcher I also support harm reduction in general. I've spoken to some of the people who work with the police department, one of the with as a social workers with juvenile intervention in mind. It's one of the few things I actually agree with about the policing around here. I think one thing that people who are suffering from drug issues, as well as juveniles, as well as people with mental health issues, all have in common is that they don't belong in the criminal justice system. There's far too much punitive justice being done to people like that, people just being thrown in jail, and then you sort of forget about them. Particularly when you're young, this is a very terrible thing to do, because you're setting somebody up for a life in the future that is just going to be a rap sheet, and that's no good. That's nothing that we need to be supporting in this community. So that would be my answer there.
Thank you. Orion Peterson Jones.
Well, harm reduction is definitely the most compassionate approach. So I absolutely do support harm reduction. I also support community-based solutions, a participatory budget, mobile services, youth outreach, and I agree with Colin that we need to decriminalize addiction. I think that we need to change the culture and create prevention methods that actually are aimed at-risk transitional aged youth. When I was growing up, we had a lot of very strong all ages, different venues, avenues, activities, extracurricular activities, and those played a big role in keeping me away from drugs, and it's certainly a number of my friends, and I would absolutely support that. As far as reallocation of police funds, I think we need to broaden and amplify the spectrum of people helping people. And I think that we need to form a new branch that's dedicated entirely just to nonviolent policing directives. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly White.
Hi. So I do support the harm reduction model. I do want to address, though, the transition youth, at-risk youth. As far as having a new juvenile hall, I would prefer to see that money, rather than incarcerating more youth, see that money go to youth diversion. I understand that we do have youth diversion counselors at the city of Arcata. I think we need more. Countywide, I don't know if folks are aware, but we do not have any inpatient services for adolescent, for substance abuse, or mental health care. So at a time when youth need to be with their families, they're shipped away 5 to 6 hours over Windy Mountain Road, and they're staying in Santa Rosa at a behavioral health clinic. That's not okay. We need services here, and if the county falls through the cracks, then Arcata should fill that bill. We need things for youth to do. I agree with what Colin was talking about. Let's get them and be proactive before they're having issues. I personally, it means a lot to me. I have a teenager, and not all parents have the ability to taxi their kids around to, say, the teen, that we have a teen place, right, actually in McKinleyville, but we do not have time.
Michael Winkler.
Well, I'm very proud of what we've done in the council in the 12 years that I've been on. That I voted strongly and strongly supported Hatcher and harm reduction, and I want to continue that and improve that. I'm also very proud during tight budget times we've continued to support and continue the youth diversion project, which keeps young people out of jail. And we also are starting as a police department now to coordinate with Health and Human Services. So when we dispatch, if it's a mental health issue, we will dispatch a mental health counselor rather than a police officer. And so those are things I'm very proud of, and I want us to continue into the future in the tradition that we've been following in Arcata.
Thank you. Emily Grace Goldstein.
Thank you. I think this is a very important question. From the beginning of it was multiple questions and they're all really important, so I'm going to try to address them all. I'm 100% for not a one-size-fits-all solution. One of the main parts of my platform is about housing, and I believe in a housing first model, which really looks at the needs of the individual, but ensures that everybody gets into housing no matter what their needs are. I also have a master's degree in social work. That is my background. So I am used to working directly with clients in all of these populations and finding creative solutions for what each individual needs. I fully support Hatcher. I've had, again, the privilege of meeting with Lacera, the executive director of Hatcher. They do amazing work. And my platform is really about redistributing police funds into our community, into services that we so desperately need here. We need better mental health care. We need harm reduction-based drug programs, drug rehabilitation. We need more community support, not policing.
Time.
Thank you.
And next, we have Camilla Zapata.
I am definitely in favor of supporting harm reduction through Hatcher. Harm reduction is proven to save economic costs for cities in the long run, as well as helping individuals in need. I think the city should coordinate efforts with existing agencies that focus on these specific areas. And I believe most of these budget cuts should go towards these programs, or reallocating money towards social needs within our community. And as to the at-risk youth, I definitely believe that providing more opportunity for them through programs like Big Brother, Big Sister, and like reaching out and connecting them to people and figureheads in the community to show them a different way of life, or possibly just another path that can be taken, needs to be more of an option for at-risk youth. And I do not support a juvenile hall building.
Thank you. Okay, and on to our next question, which comes to us from Affordable Housing Homeless Alternatives.
Hello, my name is Jessica Smith, and I'm a board member with Affordable Homeless Housing Alternatives. And I will be asking our question for this evening's forum. COVID-19 and the recent years of wildfires have continued to illuminate and exacerbate Humboldt County's housing crisis. While there are several low-income housing units in or planned for Arcata, most of them are still unattainable for those who have been chronically homeless, who have been unable to access case management support through the county, or those who are just above the low-income threshold but still can't afford regular housing. What is your position on alternative housing models such as tiny home villages, safe camping, and safe parking, all of which can provide shelter and community to individuals who can't access traditional low-income housing? What would you be willing to work with local nonprofits interested in building these models in Arcata?
All right, and we will start with Stacy Atkins Salazar this round.
So first and foremost, we definitely need more affordable housing in our community, especially in the city of Arcata, and that's a key part of my platform. And within the affordable housing is alternative housing. We have to be creative and think outside the box. I know, we've had this brought up before of types of housing that are non-traditional, and I think as a community we recognize it's something that we need, but when it comes right down to it, people don't want it typically in their neighborhood. So if we're going to be successful in coming up with alternative housing solutions, we're going to really need to engage with our community and get community support. And a big part of that is collaborating with agencies that are currently already working on things like this, such as the Arcata House or Affordable, the Housing Humboldt. So just working with those agencies to collaborate.
Thank you. Next is Sarah Shafer.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, the most important things that we need to focus on as a city too is passing Measure B to increase the cap of affordable housing in Arcata, and to first even open that door for allowing creation of more affordable housing, and also looking, yes, at these creative solutions to being able to provide space for projects like tiny homes and working to, provide assistance to these communities. We also need to look at rent control and being able to see that in Arcata, the median rental for 1 and 2 bedroom apartments is far above what an average person is making on minimum wage, and cannot necessarily afford to, access the majority of the housing that's in Arcata. We need to look at creative solutions such as also land trusts to permanently dedicate housing, and to kind of put a stop to these predatory management companies coming in and landlords coming in and hiking up rent and preventing people from being able to access affordable housing.
Paul Patino.
Yeah, I really support the Opportunity Village model of homeless camping, housing. Sometimes when you look at the Opportunity Village model, you say, well, how does it start? Well, you have a safe piece of ground that usually the municipality gives to you to use, doesn't give it to you, leases for $1 a year. So we certainly could do that. The problem we have right now is that the improvements to the land and the operation doesn't really have funding. So I feel like we should probably reach into our reserves, build the improvements to the property, and then ask for somebody to run it who's going to be a nonprofit and could oversee it, similar to Opportunity Village. And it'd be great if it was AHA or Arcata House. Actually, take anybody. Thank you.
All right. Next, we've got Colin Yo.
So I developed my platform just by talking to people in Arcata, and you'd be surprised how many times rent and rent control came up in the same conversation as homelessness. It is true that we have property management companies in this city who are abusive to renters, and the majority of Arcatans rent, and yet they have no protection. I spoke to people whose rents were increased during the pandemic, which is absolutely horrifying. That's not something that should happen in just society. So I think that first of all, we go with rent control. We start that. And then the next move is how do we build affordable housing that's outside of market interests? And I've really been advocating for Arcata getting involved in some form of public banking, which AB 857 was passed last year, which allows California communities to do that. Mm-hmm. And it would allow funding for housing coming outside of general market interest, because the elephant in the room is there's just nothing to buy for like the average working class person. And that's not going to change anytime soon unless we take a radical shift.
Hi. Orion Peterson-Jones.
Arcata has a fairly good relationship with Arcata House Partnership, and it's important that this relationship remains visible and viable. And we want to keep that from turning superficial or one-sided. I support housing alternatives and finding creative ways to adapt as a community to address housing needs of our citizens. I support housing, permanent housing, rapid housing, and a spectrum of services to prevent evictions, help people maintain their housing and decriminalize homelessness. I believe that a full range of housing options are necessary and need to be explored, with an emphasis on social services, mental health, and substance addiction assistance. I want the city to have dedicated services for chronically homeless citizens that have been on the streets for years and will need multiple resources to stay housed. I would like to crack down on slumlords, educate people on renters' rights.
Time, all right.
Thank you.
Kimberly White.
So I love the idea of tiny homes, and I've been doing a lot of research. We have some models that have been very successful. Everybody pays rent. It's not a handout, it's a hand up. They have services, it's sustainable. So they have on-site mental health services. They have substance abuse clinics. They have a car repair clinic. It's set up with a combination of tiny houses and RVs. We have one in Oahu that actually more recently, about within the last 12 months, got a 20-acre donation that they had been working on for some time. And it's a very sustainable community. We talk and we talk and we talk, but we haven't taken any action. And I know that people would like to say, oh, we've done so much. I think we can do more. I think we should do a whole lot more. We need to do permanent solutions. I feel like sometimes shelters can create more homelessness. A shelter is just that. It's temporary housing. People need housing permanent. They need to have compassion, dignity, and respect. They need to have a voice in their own future.
Michael Winkler.
Well, I've worked in the affordable housing field professionally for the last 10 years. I've worked on over 200 projects throughout the state, Humboldt County, and Arcata. That I'm currently working on a tiny house village in Santa Rosa. that we on the council are supporting safe camping, that a family member of mine works with people who are homeless, and a fellow work associate is on the board of AHA. I support using the area south of Samoa, which the city owns now, for building a tiny house village. So this is my field. In addition to all this, the projects I work on are virtually all solar and sustainable, and very much involve members of the community and people who are homeless in the operation of these projects.
All right. Emily Grace Goldstein.
So I completely support tiny home community, as well as the idea of having safe camping and safe parking sites. People are already doing this. It's just not allowed by the city. That's often why I use the term houseless instead of homeless, because people are building homes and communities for themselves in campsites that they're designating as where they're living. And so part of this is also, we need to stop raiding those communities, throwing people's stuff in the trash and dislocating them. So I completely support this idea, because it would legalize something that people are already doing to survive. So it's just another form of decriminalizing survival. I think that in terms of getting community buy-in from folks who have more privilege, they might see this as an inconvenience, and community education can help with that. If we start having conversations about what it really means, we hopefully can get more community buy-in and support for these type of facilities.
I think I hear the timer. Okay. Camilla Zapata.
I believe housing is a human right, and I'm willing to work towards building these alternative models. I particularly like the tiny home villages, but I believe that the safe camping and safe parking and legal campgrounds should be implemented as well. I think it's really a countywide issue, and too many people are experiencing houselessness countywide. It's necessary to start working with other cities in the county to move forward on a universal implementation, because I believe that too many times cities individually don't necessarily want to take it on. We have a limited amount of land in Arcata, and all it takes is one business owner to speak up, and capitalism wins. And that business owner pays taxes in the city of Arcata, which gets the city running. And so no one's willing to upset that person, and understandably so. But I think that when you talk to individual citizens, everybody is on board with creating something. And I think that the platform needs to be created, or maybe a vote sent out, or in order of the city's money to see exactly where and how people want it done.
That's time. Nick Matthews.
I'm in full support of the I'm in full support of housing for the mini houses. I'm in full support of bringing homes to everybody that we can. We're going to need to set up some sort of safe houses, campgrounds, places that people can go. I was in front of my store the other day, and I had a customer ask me, "How do you feel about people sleeping in the doorways of this city?" And obviously, they need a place to go. And I said, "Well, I would love to have a place where they can go, and then come downtown and do what they want to do. But we're going to have strong oversight on wherever we set up this housing at. And really the $1 million question is, where are we going to set the housing up at? Wherever you go, it seems like you have people who, just like she said, are against it. It only takes one business owner or one person to voice their opinion against it, and then it really becomes a larger issue of a place to go." Thank you.
Thank you. And our next question, and I guess I want to take the temperature of the room before I do the next question. There are a lot of you here who are answering these. Would you like us to put the question up again halfway through the candidates so you can get refreshed on what we're actually talking about? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Yes.
Got some thumbs up. Okay, great. Tech, if you could make that happen, that'd be fabulous. And our next question is from the North Coast Environmental Center.
Hi, my name is Carrie Tully. I'm the Administrative and Development Director for the North Coast Environmental Center. In 2019, the Eureka City Council returned its portion of Tuluwat to the Wiyot tribe. If you are elected, Will you be open to restoring and returning land to the Wiyot? Thank you.
And we will start with Sarah Shafer this time.
I think it is of the utmost importance to recognize that we are living on Indigenous land. I think the action of returning to the Native people was essential and important. And I think we need to continue along this path of recognizing the legacy of the Native land that we live on and preserving it for future generations and for generations of Indigenous people living in Arcata and living in Humboldt County. I also think that there needs to be a more formal recognition within Arcata of the atrocities that have taken place towards Native Americans. I think removing the McKinley statue is a first step, but I think there needs to be recognition on the plaza of the fact that slave trade of Indigenous people used to take place there. I think there needs to be some sort of museum that might exist on the plaza that is curated by Native tribes and local professionals and local people that are involved in this community to kind of recognize what has taken place and just kind of get this rich history of tribes involved in Arcata politics. I think there needs to be oversight by the Wiyot tribe on okay, it's really hard to hear. Yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Paul Patino.
Yeah, I just say yes, restore some Wiyot land. And I wouldn't want to be the person to pick it out. So I think that in conjunction with the Wiyot, we have the intention of restoring some land, form a land trust, start getting people to donate money and or pieces of land to that land trust, specifically to go to the Wiyot tribe. And the city could certainly facilitate some of this. And I don't know, maybe even we have a piece that would be city property. So I think that we've got all these land trusts around here. I don't even know how many, maybe 8 or 10 of them. If each one of them was willing to donate some and the cities facilitate, I think we could actually create something of size and significance that the Wiyot would like to have back. Thanks.
Colin Yo.
Yeah, so I support reparations and restoration of land to the Wiyot people. I don't even know where that would even end. If I had my way, I'd give the whole city back, but obviously that's not feasible politically. I frankly think that it's something that needs to radically change in our future though, because this is stolen land and I don't want to just do something that is like a gesture. I don't want to do something that just seems sort of like performative. I would like to do something that actually has a concrete material benefit to the surviving tribal members because it is their ancestral land. It is not our land. Thank you.
Orion Peterson Jones.
Having been born and raised in Humboldt County, I absolutely and strongly support the returning of land as well as reparations for the Wiyot people. But because this is actually a question from the North Coast Environmental Center, I'd actually like to use the rest of my time to talk a little bit about climate change. Arcata recently declared a climate emergency, but continues to invest in Chevron, one of the worst climate damaging companies. As representatives for the people, it is financially irresponsible and morally questionable that a city that touts itself as green and progressive continues to invest in companies whose interests do not favor Arcata. Declaring a climate emergency should not merely be a symbolic gesture. Arcata has over $6 million invested in the LAIF, Local Agency Investment Fund. I would strongly support divesting funds from the LAIF and advancing community interests over big corporate interests, ultimately cultivating Arcata's self-reliance and sending a clear message that Arcata's investments reflect our values. Thank you.
All right. Kimberly White.
So I believe it's close to a year, October 21st, if I'm not mistaken, the city of Eureka returned over 200 acres of land known as Dulawater Indian Island to the Wiyot tribe. The land represents a physical and cultural center for the Wiyot people. I was really proud to be at that ceremony but I believe it's a start. And here in Arcata, I feel like we are on the traditional lands of the Wiyot people, and I feel that we do need to continue acknowledgement, make reparations, land reparations. I guess an act of reconciliation would be to give back pieces of the land. And it's actually not our land to give back in the first place. We talk about colonization and how we have a communal responsibility to land that is inherent to the indigenous people. So I think returning the land to the indigenous nations, not just individuals, is a necessary, it is essential that we do that as a community, as part of our acknowledgement to the land. Did the bell go off?
It did go off. Yeah.
Talking? I apologize.
It's hard to hear. Michael Winkler. You're muted, Michael.
As the opening speaker and other speakers have said, that we are on land that is the traditional home of the Wiyot people. But I think the key thing is to ask the Wiyot people and other Native peoples what they want, that we can't assume what they want. I think that was a key element in Eureka, that was a piece of land, Tuawat, that was sacred to them. And if there are other areas of Arcata that they regard as sacred to them, or if there are other actions that they want the city to take, I think that should guide what we do.
Emily Grace Goldstein.
So I'm fully in favor of restoring and returning land to the Wiyot people. This is not our land, this is their land. Connected with climate change, we know that historically Indigenous people are better stewards of the land than we may be in our current capitalist society. You mentioned, Carolyn, the honor tax. That's something that I've been really in favor of. I've had folks bring up to me additionally renaming the streets and creeks in Arcata, and that's something that there's actually already a petition going around, but we need to take the names off of the streets that belong to perpetrators of genocide and rename them with traditional names of the land. I also think we can reintroduce a decolonized version of history into our education system to teach our future generations what happened and stop ourselves from repeating history. Thank you.
Thank you. Camilla Zapata.
A million times over, yes, I'm in favor of this. I believe that we need to honor having gone back against contracts previously made on this land, and I'm in favor of land reparations and Indigenous solidarity by doing so. I was really proud of Eureka and I guess being a neighbor city when they gave back to Lot Island. And I would agree with, I don't remember who said it, I believe Sarah, with a formal recognition from the city, acknowledging that this is stolen land, and there should be some sort of representation of it on the plaza. I think that's a brilliant idea. That's the best idea I have heard so far for representing the history of this land.
Thank you. Nick Matthews.
Definitely open-minded to it, and I'm willing to talk about it. This is definitely a complicated issue for a lot of people here in Arcata. There's no doubt about that. I'd be willing to take a look at different sacred sites, different areas that are sacred to the Wiyots. I'm also into having some sort of a tribal liaison that we can go ahead and refer to and talk to about different things that we're going to be doing in our city in the future. So yeah, I'm open-minded to it for sure.
Stacy Atkins Salazar.
So I will absolutely listen to and work with the Wiyot tribe to restore and return their land to them. And in order to do this in an authentic way, we need to follow their lead. I think it was Paul who mentioned we can't just, as a council, give them what we think we want to or what would be appropriate. That's not really being authentic. So I feel like talking with the tribe, working with the tribe on many issues that we have in our city and collaborating with them is the key to that. On the campaign trail, people have asked me different questions about reparations, and that has always been my first response is I am in favor of reparations, but they need they need to be led by the groups that we owe them to, and then we support that and make it happen. And it is a complicated issue. We're all on the same page here in this forum, so we're making it sound easy, but there's a lot of people in our community that are going to need to be educated and worked with if we want to make it happen.
Thank you. Okay, and our next question comes from the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities.
My name is Colin Fisk, and I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities, or CRTP. CRTP recently released a report called Elephants in the Road, where we document how climate chaos, the rise of autonomous vehicles, and the safety crisis for pedestrians and bicyclists will shape Humboldt County's future transportation system. The solutions to the challenges posed by these three major phenomena have a lot in common. Notably, they call for reducing the amount of driving we do locally. Since marginalized communities, including people of color, low-income people, and people with disabilities, are disproportionately impacted by each of these issues, any solutions must also address equity in the transportation system. If elected, what would you do to reduce the amount of local driving while increasing transportation equity?
And we will start off with Paul Patino this round.
Yeah, I really have a great respect for you, Colin, and for what you're doing. You know, if we look at Arcata and just think about what is it? It's a giant open shopping mall. And, you know, in shopping malls, you park your car and you walk. And I think that as we look at closing streets, widening sidewalks, adding bike lanes, doing anything to take the transportation lanes or the ways of transportation somewhat away from the car. The car has to be much more in competition with what we'd really have to like to have is a place that we can walk and bike without being worried about getting hit. And we've done some things here, but really, I think we radically need to look at H and G Street, widen those sidewalks, and pinch the driving lanes down. Thank you.
All right. Next, we've got Colin Yeo.
Yeah, I got asked about this a couple of times on the campaign trail, and I am in favor of car-free zones in Arcata, like you see in Europe, like you see in parts of Holland. That seems like a good thing to do for a nice little walkable city like us. Of course, we'd have to offset that by having greater parking elsewhere, as well as an expansion, not a reduction of our current mass transit system, which is now not operating in its normal capacity in the wake of COVID. We only have one lane or one line that's running right now. It's a complicated issue when it comes to sort of like climate change, because one thing that the pandemic has shown that even though people are driving less in the pandemic, pollution is not exactly going down. The major polluters are industry more than vehicles. And there are people who live in rural Humboldt that really need vehicles to get back and forth in there. So we have to consider their needs too, because they do come to Arcata and they spend money here. So I think the way to go about that is to find offset whatever car-free zones there are with more parking, and make sure that we are a more pedestrian-friendly city.
All right, thank you, Colin. Orion Peterson-Jones.
Well, when addressing climate change, we always have to start locally. But instead of saying we need to make a plan to decrease emissions by such and such percent by this year or the next, we need to establish deterrence and discourage car culture altogether. Close streets to vehicles, levy a citywide gas tax, increase fines for traffic violations and parking violations. All these actions taken at the same time would definitely be uncomfortable and not pleasing for a lot of people, but they would address the issue of climate change immediately. We can also support Measure A, convert the city fleet of city vehicles into alternative fuel, hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles. We can promote pedestrian only zones, close lanes of traffic. For example, on the plaza could go down to one lane. We could have city sponsored campaigns to remind people that driving is a luxury.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Orion. Kimberly White.
So a lot of elephants in the road. Climate chaos, autonomous vehicles. Haven't seen too many of those. Definitely we have a safety crisis for pedestrians and bicyclists. I recently got a e-bike, awesome program, rebate program through Redwood Coast Energy. And I live in Valley West. And I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't really gotten on that bike because I'm afraid. I'm afraid to ride from Valley West along West End Road. I would be face planted in the dirt on the side of the road. It's just not safe. So I'd like to see more bike paths from Valley West to HSU so the students can get there safely. One of my solutions to get some of these cars off the road is to charge for parking on the plaza. And like HSU, let's implement a free bus system. We have an electric bus, but I haven't really seen it. And I think that we could partner with a grant so that it's a grant match so that we can make bus rides free, just like they do for, it's part of HSU's program. Did you tell me enough?
Yep.
I get lost in it.
Michael Winkler.
Well, I've been a very strong advocate of alternative transportation, and I drive about 300 miles a year and take the bus for many, many miles, including going cross country by Greyhound. And many years I've been the representative to HTA, that I've strongly supported Arcata funding and building the rail trail towards Eureka, which we're going to complete in the near future, and also building the Annie and Mary Trail. And even though it's going to help rich people more than poor people, I support the governor's order to make all cars manufactured in Arcata or in the state of California be all electric. And we also need a variety of different vehicles to be operated by HTA, small vehicles and small and large vehicles, to much better meet the needs of all users, especially people who don't have cars and depend heavily on public transportation.
Thank you. Emily Grace Goldstein.
Well, I'm really glad that this question was framed from an equity lens, because I really do think that the issue of transportation does boil down to equity. And so I'm completely in favor of increasing our busing system and hopefully seeing a decrease in the use of cars. I think we need more frequent buses with more bus stops. And to make sure that when we're talking about moving away from cars, that we're also talking about how does this fit into disability justice. A lot of people that I have talked about have talked about how for them, as a person living with a disability, this town is not accessible. The sidewalks are not accessible. And so if we're gonna make more walking and more biking in this town, we need to make sure it's accessible to everyone. And so no matter who you are, you can actually use that. If you're going to use the bus, make sure that you can get on it with a wheelchair, and that it's gonna come frequently enough so that everybody is not just sitting out there waiting. And so I think that, oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Camilla Zapata.
Transportation equity. I think that the infrastructure for the future needs to include more bike lanes, like have been previously said. I think bicycle parking places as well need to be increased, especially on the plaza. I know that there are a lot of spaces, but on days like farmers market, you have to put your bike farther away. And I think people are discouraged from even bringing it at times because there's not somewhere visible that you can keep your eye on your bike so that it doesn't get stolen, because that's also an issue. The transit system integration with more stops, more hours or expanded hours, and looking to the future to see what the next 10 years might look like, expanding that system. And as we are trying to fight climate change, and then slowing speeds, travel speeds, I think might help for encouraging both pedestrian traffic as well as bicycle traffic. I think that there's some areas of the town that you can go much faster in than others, and that you're not going to get stopped in unless someone's crossing a crosswalk. And I've seen people drive way too fast. Yeah. I also have free zones.
Nick Matthews.
This one, I think the clock is definitely ticking on. Gavin Newsom just passed the no new gas-powered cars by 2035. So we're going to have to really get on this one for sure. I think we can definitely make Arcata more walkable, increase the size of the sidewalks. They just did that on the 8th Street project about 10 years ago, and they widened our sidewalk in front of the shop between 3 to 5 feet, which made it much better for pedestrians to walk up and down the street. I think that we can definitely add more bike lanes in to the town to make it more accessible by bicycle. I feel that before the pandemic, I was kind of against getting rid of a lot of the parking there on the plaza, but I think the people have opened their minds to that with the separation that we have at this point. So I definitely would be open to that issue as well. It really comes down to a public health issue in a lot of ways as well. You get people out, they're walking, they're riding their bikes, they get healthier. And I think that we need to go forward with that for sure. Time is taken on that one.
Okay, Stacy Atkins Salazar.
So we most certainly need to rethink our norms and just continue to educate ourselves and our community on ways that we can change our behavior and get out of the rut that a lot of us are used to existing in, which is driving our own vehicles everywhere. We definitely need to reallocate part of the right-of-way to pedestrians and bicycles so that people that are making those choices to travel that way are safe, and it would encourage more people to travel that way. Connecting our towns by the pathway that Mayor Winkler talked about is also key to that. Being able to go from one town to another on alternate transportation is an important part of that. But as we're doing this, we do need to be thoughtful and considerate of how we're doing it and how it will change our community to make sure that it is the best change possible and that we have people on board.
Sarah Shafer.
I've had the pleasure of speaking with Colin and other members of the CRTP and along with other business owners on and near the plaza about this issue. And I think it's a really important one to address, especially in the face of climate change. And also just kind of the fact of, the changing landscape of our city as it grows and as, the population increases. The city needs to support and fund projects that improve the livability and also address the climate crisis that we're facing, and finding ways to do this is pretty consistent with Arcata's values. Finding alternatives to driving is going to be vital. And I know that a lot of people have spoken about, yes, this idea of shutting down lanes of the plaza, whether that be during farmers market, whether that be all the time. But we've seen, businesses thrive when we have festivals where the whole plaza is closed down. People will still walk to their destination. They will walk, up to a quarter, half mile to get to where they're going. And so that is part of increasing parking that is off the plaza that will encourage people to use pedestrian space, make the plaza more pedestrian friendly. And then also going off of that, needing to create a more robust transportation system okay, thank you.
Sarah. And I just want to let you know we are more than halfway through, so everybody's doing a fantastic job of lasting through all of this. And I was just reminded that we will be playing this on the radio, so I want to announce for people who are not watching this that what is happening here is we're talking with the 10 candidates for Arcata City Council tonight. And so our next question comes from Cooperation Humboldt.
Hi, my name is Tobin McKee, and I am from Cooperation Humboldt. The COVID crisis is disrupting local business. Studies show that worker-owned cooperatives outperform traditional businesses. They last longer, they pay better, and both productivity and overall employee satisfaction is way higher. A number of cities are investing millions of dollars in worker co-ops as part of a strategy for inclusive economic development. And here in Humboldt, the North Coast Small Business Development Center is partnered with Cooperation Humboldt to incubate worker co-ops. Do you support policies that would promote and strengthen the development of worker co-ops? We need favorable taxation, investment in loan funds, training, and research. Are you going to work with local organizations incubating local cooperatives?
And we will start with Colin Yeo this time.
Yes, I am a fan of worker cooperatives. I am a fan of any sort of union or prevailing wage type organization. And I would absolutely, in general, be favorable to pro-labor movements within the city. particularly at a time when the cannabis industry is starting to actually make an economic impact here. And I don't know how many of those workers are protected, how much organization they have, and if they're being properly compensated. So yeah, those are all things that I am heavily in support of, and I would be an ally to labor as a city councilman. Thank you.
Thank you. Orion Peterson-Jones.
So Arcata's comprehensive plan has previously stated that Arcata's economy reflects the efforts of our many entrepreneurs, artisans, and small businesses, the support of citizens who value local investment, and those who offer value-added products from locally available sources. I think it's important to apply this same concept to worker collectives. And now, not a lot of people know this about me, but this is actually a subject that's very close to my heart because I was actually in a workers collective at one time. What used to be the Java Garage in Sunnybray, which is now the Coffee Break, I was actually part of a workers collective that attempted to purchase that. So I actually have quite a bit of insight into how collectives function, the spirit that drives people to work for themselves, how tasks and responsibilities are delegated, consensus building and decision-making processes, and defining one's mission. And so I think those are all really important. Workers collectives offer better pay, they're more just, they have better safety nets, they have specialized skill set workers, better products, and the workers have a higher quality of life. Thank you. Sorry.
Kimberly White. Oh, you're muted, Kimberly.
Technical difficulties. So I absolutely would support worker collaborative. I think that we should do an economic development fund specifically to fund these worker collaboratives. And as pointed out, that it's very important that there's higher employee satisfaction, there's a prevailing wage, they're invested in the community. And, you know, we used to have something called Arcata Economic Development, and that particular organization was there for these particular for worker co-ops or any other business that needed some assistance. So I feel like we need to get some funding again in Arcata for these worker cooperatives. And sorry, my Great Dane is sitting here trying to sit on my lap while I'm talking, and I'm losing myself here. So yeah, I'm definitely in. I definitely would have.
Oh, I hear the jingle of the bell.
In the nick of time too.
Michael Winkler. You're muted, Michael.
I support worker cooperatives that, as a long-term member of the best known, the Arcata co-op. And I also have, as one other person mentioned, I have very strong union support. I'm endorsed by the Building and Construction Trades, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Operating Engineers Local 3. And you know, clearly our economic system is not working, and what we need is to take things down to a local level, and you can't do better than having that in a local cooperative. So I would support the city working with people who want to form these, and using the funding that the city gets from the feds, and helping form local cooperatives.
Thank you. Emily Grace Goldstein.
Yeah, I will always support anything that gives rights and power to workers and protects workers in the workplace. And so unions, cooperatives, and anything similar will always be something that I will stand in line with and give my support as a city council person too. I think it's really important that we safeguard our workers' rights and make sure that everybody has a fair and safe place to work and a fair wage. And I think this has been reflected by the multiple labor union endorsements that I have received. I've been endorsed by the Central Labor Council as well as the United Food and Commercial Workers Union 5. And I'm extremely honored to have both of those endorsements. Thank you.
Camilla Zapata.
I am definitely in favor of policies favoring worker co-ops. I think worker co-ops allow fair wages and equity in a company and provide a truly democratic workplace where each vote counts. Providing more workers and employees with opportunities to buy shares, companies can help workers and communities raise that standard of living, which we really need more of in this area. I believe that the city has, I believe it's REDAC that gives out local loans. And I think that maybe shifting gears towards opportunities to focus more on worker co-ops should be looked into in the future for other organizations doing this. And then SBA loans as well. That's it.
Thank you. Nick Matthews.
I'm absolutely in favor of this. When workers are part owning in their own businesses, they work harder, and it shows in the public relations. In Arcata, there's so many storefronts that are open at the moment, and we need to fill those storefronts. We need the jobs in Arcata really very badly. I'm willing to work with the SBDC about this. More storefronts, really, I mean, they equal more shopping and higher revenues. We're going to need to bring up the revenues in Arcata a little bit. This pandemic has been devastating to our tax revenue. We need this money to work on a lot of other issues at the moment. I'm willing to go forward with working with the cannabis industry in this. The cannabis industry is one of our new industries in here. And I can tell you from personal experience, it's going to bring tax revenue to our town, which is desperately needed. And I also feel that we need to streamline the permit process. Make it easier for people to open storefronts. I know that the bagels wanted to go in the Jacoby Storehouse. They had a hard time with the city getting those things approved. We can definitely work on this and welcome more people into our business community. Thank you.
Stacy Atkins Salazar.
I absolutely support workers' rights and protections, and I see worker co-ops as a great way to help do this. Some of my other the other candidates, I am also endorsed by the Humboldt Del Norte Labor Council, as well as the Building Construction Trades Council of Humboldt and Del Norte, which house all of the engineers and electricians and sheet metal workers. So I'm really grateful for their endorsement and help with my campaign. We've got to be creative in what we do, and allowing people to unite and work together and helping that so that they can organize gives people power. And right now there's such a disparity in power between workers and businesses, and especially big business. So whatever we can do in our city to promote workers and try to level the playing field out a little bit is important, or level it out a lot. But I support that.
Sarah Shafer.
I definitely support policies that are going to help local cooperatives succeed, and by proxy through that help local business and local economy succeed. Especially right now, we need to look at how to have economic growth and how to kind of jumpstart the economy in the face of the pandemic. I think having new innovative ways for businesses to be able to open up and get people involved is going to be so important. I support workers' rights and unions, and I think that workers who are invested in their business and that are a part of that cooperation are going to be more invested to give back to the community and support their community and kind of create more economic opportunity for themselves within Arcata. And I think that's so important right now. And also just looking at types of businesses that can take advantage of this kind of cooperation model, and especially being supportive of the growth of cannabis business in Arcata, looking at that cannabis innovation zone and looking how businesses within that can take advantage of this model to be more successful. And that's the bell. Thank you.
Paul Patino.
Yeah, I would like to see us take the new industrial park that we're planning, long range planning, that's located near our Alder Grove Industrial Park. I'd like to take that new industrial park to be a truly live work worker co-op designed from the beginning to be a place like that. And I think that we have an opportunity to do that because we own that property. We have long range plans to make it an industrial park. And it's we haven't built anything yet. It's a great time to try to do this. And currently our in Alder Grove Industrial Park, you know, the parcels are pretty big. It's too hard for somebody to get in if they're small. So I would like to see us focus on that, live work, worker co-op on our new park.
Thank you, Paul. And our next question comes to us from the Humboldt Del Norte Central Labor Council. Got Scott from the Humboldt CLC.
Measure F will allow the fire district to continue to provide fire protection services to the communities served, including McKinleyville, Manila, Bayside, Jacoby Creek, and Arcata, by restoring 8 vacant firefighting positions that have been frozen due to budget cuts, reopening the 3rd fire station to ensure safe and rapid emergency fire and medical responses, ensuring there are adequate dollars applied to the vehicle replacement fund to address aging firefighting equipment as needed, replenish the emergency reserve funds that were spent over the past 3 budget cycles to maintain 3 staffed and operational stations 24/7, 365. Do you support Measure F? Why or why not?
And we're going to start this round with Orion Peterson Jones.
The answer is absolutely 100% yes. And my reason is because to not vote that in, it's not an option. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly White.
Hi. So yes, absolutely for Measure F. And some of the proponents have had some arguments saying, well, you know, last year you had a deficit and now you're not. So how do you explain that? And I think that the explanatory answer for that is, well, when you lay off 8 fire workers, you're going to have a surplus. Right now, we had what they call stacking. So we had 3 fires, but we only had 2 fire engines. So you know what? I think $8 a month is what it's going to cost for a homeowner. $6 a month for a mobile homeowner is a small price to pay for ensuring life. Those few minutes that, you know, make a huge difference. I don't know if a lot of people know, but Arcata Ambulance is actually located in McKinleyville. So if you have something, an emergency, I personally want to cut that time. And so we really need to make sure that what didn't pass last time, which was Measure R, now Measure F, has to pass. It's essential.
Thank you, Kimberly. Michael Winkler.
Right. As a long-term member of the Arcata City Council, I have very publicly supported all the ballot measures that the fire district asked for. That they're absolutely critical to fast response to fires, to medical emergencies, and we have to recognize that we've gone from a volunteer fire department to a professional fire department, and we have to pay for that, and we have to have them have the professional equipment and first-class equipment that they need to service in Arcata. So I'm very proud in my long-term support for the Arcata Fire District.
Thank you. Emily Grace Goldstein.
I'm fully in support of Measure F for so many reasons. We've seen both through our state and locally fires have been breaking out, and we need the public safety and the support for our community. It also means job creation to fill those roles for firefighters. This is super necessary funding that really just improves and supports our community as a whole. As Kimberly said, a few dollars a month is worth saving lives. It's worth protecting the safety of our community. And so I see no reason to not support this measure. I do know that we had previously have had a similar measure in Arcata and it did not pass. And so I think really at this point, it's about talking with the general population, with voters, about why this is so important and why it needs to pass, so everyone feels comfortable with it and is on board. Thank you.
Camilla Zapata.
I wholeheartedly agree with this measure and support our local fire departments in moving into the future with a fully staffed and fully stocked 3 locations. I believe that there was not enough education or information to educate people prior to this when it was Measure F, and that's why it did fail. And I'm glad that they've come back around with more education, more information, and a lot more transparency this time.
Thank you. Nick Matthews.
I am definitely in full favor of this, 150%. I'm endorsed by Jess McDonald, our fire chief. This is really a public safety issue. We need those people for first responders. We had the call stacking just this week, like Kimberly was saying, and there's just not enough. We really are set up right at this moment with 2 firehouses that only staffing basically 4 people apiece, I believe. So our first responders definitely and our firefighters need the resources that are needed for emergency responses to these situations. For a perfect example is if we didn't have the firehouse down on the plaza, the big blue fire would have been much, much worse, and we could have definitely lost that entire building. It's a necessity. I'm 150% in favor of Measure F. There's no doubt about it.
Stacy Atkins Salazar.
I too support Measure F 100%, or maybe 150% like Nick. But it's not just about safety. That's the main issue. I mean, if we don't pass this, we are going to have some serious safety issues in our community. So it really has to pass. But it also creates jobs, and 8 good jobs. So I think that's an important part of the measure as well to keep in mind. The fire chief, Justin McDonald, is an endorser on my campaign as well. And we talked about a lot of the misconceptions that people have regarding Arcata Fire. Some of it's the name. It's not just Arcata. And, you know, we all know this in this forum, but we need to get the word out there. So I would just encourage people, if you're undecided or not planning to vote yes on F, to please do some research, make those phone calls, because we've got to get it to pass.
Sarah Shafer?
Yeah, I think to go off what a lot of candidates have said, that education piece is really important, and that was lacking in the last election. And I think a lot of people are now realizing that, yes, the Arcata Fire District does not only cover Arcata, it covers McKinleyville, Blue Lake, Manila, the whole surrounding area, and having, you know, more operational fire stations to be able to help these areas, not only just Arcata, is essential and important. And also the fact that it's providing more jobs and being able to have well-trained firefighters who are working in our community. When, you know, grant money runs out and we stop funding the fire department, then, you know, these well-trained firefighters left our community, and it's kind of just a big blow to us. And so being able to have this, you know, for a small fee of less than $100 a year for a single family home, to be able to support and protect property and people, most importantly, people from, you know, fire danger, is essential. So yes on F.
Paul Patino?
Yeah, I support Measure F, and I'm glad that they came back and smoothed up the measure before they put it out to the public. And I feel like any people that had a question about it last time should have understood that it was necessary, and yes on F for everybody's reasons. Thank you.
And Colin Yo.
Yeah, I think we're unanimous amongst myself and my fellow candidates that F is very important, and having a well-funded fire department is absolutely crucial for any city. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it, other than I say I heartily support it.
Thank you. All right, our next question comes from Healthcare for All Humboldt and Physicians for a National Health Program.
My name is Corinne Fragoni, and I'm a member of the Humboldt County chapter of Healthcare for All and Physicians for a National Health Program. My question to the Arcata City Council candidates is as follows. In 2017, Humboldt County spent $18+ million on healthcare insurance plans for its 2,377 employees. Studies have shown that about 1/3 of all payments to private health insurance companies is wasted on profit, overhead, bureaucratic duplication, and unnecessary administrative complexity. Obviously, this applies to other local government agencies as well. A comprehensive single-payer system in California would provide huge savings to the city of Arcata. What is your position on removing the health insurance burden from the city of Arcata by supporting by resolution, the establishment of a single-payer, universal, equitable healthcare system in the state of California. Please give the reasons for your answer.
And this time around, we will be starting with Kimberly White.
So I think that healthcare is a basic human right, and I've always been in support of a single payer healthcare program. The size of your pocketbook should not dictate the quality of your healthcare, and I believe that it would really unburden the city of Arcata if we could move forward in California for a universal healthcare plan. It would also take care of the disparity that we have, because it's not a very equitable situation right now. Families who don't have private health care then are reliant on what the state of California is offering, and people fall between the cracks. I spoke to it earlier that I found out that those who don't have private health care, adolescents, have no inpatient services in all of California. That's a travesty. And I'm sure that everyone has their own story about healthcare inequities. So it would level the playing field. It's a basic human right. Is there a bell again that I am not hearing? I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm looking to you for that guidance because I'm not hearing it. I apologize.
Sounds good. I'll wave my hands. Next, we got Michael Winkler.
Well, the U.S. has the most expensive healthcare system in the world per person, but we have tremendous numbers of people who fall through the cracks. The insurance companies are providing no useful service. And so I very strongly support universal single-payer healthcare. It's been successful in many places in the world, including Europe and Canada, where I visited in Kerala and India. I'm friends with Dr. Wendy Ring, who's been a leader on this, and very much agree with Wendy and Dr. Fragoni, and feel that it's a human right and it's something that we need to do here in Arcata and throughout the state of California and throughout the US. So lean on Joe Biden when he becomes president to support universal health care in the United States.
Thank you. Emily Grace Goldstein.
Yes, I'm fully in support of the idea of single payer healthcare. I think that this is an issue of health equity. It's a human right to be able to access healthcare. This has been stated before. I know Kimberly was saying this, but nobody should be denied access just because they can't pay for it. They don't have healthcare through their job. Right now, our healthcare system is extremely inequitable, leads to extreme health disparities, and people not being able to access the care that they really need. And in this area, we know we have trouble accessing needed health care. And so having more options would be amazing. It's exactly what we need for this community, as well as everybody in the state of California, in the US. I see no reason to stand behind this and support it. My current position is working through a nonprofit in public health, and I will always, always support anything that increases individuals' health and access to health.
Camilla Zapata.
I support single-payer healthcare system for the state of California. Insurance companies do not have the interest of the individually insured in mind, and are looking out for investors' returns and not people. I think if we're looking at this at a national level, it can be a little difficult to imagine this transition, but at a state level, it's more realistic. I personally had a dear friend of mine pass away because he did not have adequate health insurance. He was pushed to the bottom of the list, and I think there's one too many stories. I'm sure we all have them that can relate to that.
Thank you. Nick Matthews?
Yes, I'm definitely in support of the single payer system. Our main system at the moment is absolutely broken. People are definitely afraid to go to the doctor. They're choosing between their medicine or food, especially during this pandemic situation that we're in. My stepchildren are Karuk, and they go to the Potawat village here right beside my house. And it's wonderful. They have the ability to get healthcare whenever they need it, to go and get checkups when they need it. People are afraid to go to the doctor simply for just simple checkups, or for nutritional needs. They need responses to different healthcare issues that they're having. I personally went to the emergency room last year, and I was there for what, 2 hours, I believe, and I ended up paying over $10,000 for two hours in the emergency room. These kinds of prices are absolutely absurd, and this system definitely needs to be fixed, and I'm in total favor of the single payer system.
Stacy Atkins Salazar.
I too am in favor of a single payer system. What I find interesting is almost everybody I know, I mean, I can't think of a single person, no matter what side of the or what part of the political spectrum they fall on, that thinks that we have a good and adequate system. So to me, I think it's almost ridiculous that we're still arguing about this, because we're pretty much all on the same page. It's just how to make it happen. So my first choice would be for a national system, because that would benefit our entire country. But getting that together might not be possible, and oftentimes as Californians we're asked to lead the way. And so if it's up to us to be that example, then I say that we should definitely go for it. And there should not be profit in healthcare. Absolutely not. There should not be that incentive there. And in case we don't get to other questions regarding this, as far as profit goes, I also don't believe in for-prison profits as well. So let's get the profit out of healthcare and our prison system.
Sarah Shafer.
Surprise, surprise. I support healthcare for all, a single payer system on the local, state, national level. It's all around the world, and those systems work wherever you look in Canada and Sweden and Germany. We see that they work. We need to focus on people and human health rather than profits of insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies. And also just in general, we need to work to bring and provide more healthcare resources to Humboldt County. We are severely lacking in healthcare resources, especially mental health resources. And the fact that having issues with your insurance or somebody not taking your insurance shouldn't impede access to those resources for people. And I especially know as a young person, as a millennial, I have put off routine healthcare because I am afraid of that bill. I am afraid to, have to go to the dentist and them tell me that I might, have to pay $2,000 to have something fixed, right? We shouldn't be scared of going to the doctor because of what the bill is going to be. We should be supporting our communities by taking care of everybody and by taking care of the health, because the health of individuals is more important than corporations. Thank you.
Paul Patino.
Yeah, we should definitely have a single payer program in the state of California. We got plenty enough people. The part of the system already exists. In fact, I use our national socialized medicine known as a VA because I'm a vet. So it definitely can be done. It is being done. I fortunately, as a vet, I can go to the VA. Also, I travel to Europe quite often. When I'm in Italy, I'm an Italian citizen. I get free healthcare, and it's cheap, easy to get, easy to access. So for me, single payer, yes, and we already have components of it with the VA, socialized medicine, and other things like Medi-Cal, Medicaid. So thank you.
Thank you. Colin Yeo.
I, along with everyone else, support universal single-payer healthcare, particularly Medicare for all. It's infuriating on the local level because this is really something that should be dealt with from the federal level down, but I just see no political will in Washington because we live in an incredibly corrupt time and our two-party system has failed us utterly. We had a shot, I believe, at Medicare for all, maybe, but that was put to the knife on Super Tuesday, and I don't really see Joe Biden or Donald Trump doing anything for this healthcare of citizens. So I guess we got to lead in the state. We got to try to find a way to lead locally, which I think is really lousy because, frankly, this is something that should be coming from the federal government. This is something that should be coming from the nation as a whole. It should be, top down. And I think it's tough. Like, how would you run? Imagine if we were responsible for all the highway repairs here, as a community. It doesn't make sense locally so much as it does federally. But I'm in favor, yes.
Thank you. Orion Peterson-Jones.
We learned recently that a third of the CARES Act that was approved by the Pentagon actually went to defense contractors. Promoting defense spending when millions of Americans don't even have basic health care speaks clearly to where our government's priorities lie. It's always profits over people. The insurance industry is bringing an amoral profit motive into people's healthcare. I think it's fair to say that public health, especially with what we're observing right now during a pandemic, it's not just a priority, it's a necessity, and accessibility is an absolute must. I think the lack of medical and dental doctors that will accept new patients locally is disheartening for insurance reasons. It's disheartening. All Western nations that have decent healthcare have nationalized healthcare. And I can speak with personal experience to the quality of services, treatment, equipment, billing options, and out-of-pocket costs that provided to patients of single-payer systems in foreign countries. A move to single-payer systems here is long overdue.
Thank you, Orion. Okay, and speaking of people over profits, our second to the last question of the evening comes from the Humboldt chapter of Move to Amend.
The Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court codified in law that corporations have the same constitutional rights as natural persons and can give unlimited amounts of money to political candidates. Question: will you pledge to support the We the People Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that states corporations are not natural persons, do not have constitutional rights, and money is not a form of free speech? If you do not support this amendment, please tell us why.
And we'll start with Michael Winkler on this one.
I have supported this for a long time, that it's ludicrous that money is treated as speech and corporations are people. And I think the flip side of it is that people are not treated as people. And so I think that fundamentally that we're also going to have to consistently overcome this ridiculous imbalance on the Supreme Court of people who get elected by the Electoral College or gerrymandering or vote suppression prevent this from happening. So I think that it's critical. I very definitely support Move to Amend. And I know Caitlin Saposi Belknap, who's been the leader on this, and I very much respect the work that she's been doing.
Emily Grace Goldstein.
Yes, there's no reason we should be seeing corporations as people. Corporations have so much money, which buys so much power that an individual can never match. Elections should not be able to be bought. Corporations should not have that type of power in our country. And so I absolutely would be in support of a move to amend. Within my own campaign, I'm only accepting small individual donations from people because that's who's voting, that's whose voice matters, as well as small organizations, because those are the voices that matter. That's what it should be like on our national level. Corporations just shouldn't have this type of power. It's not right when we are supposed to be a democracy that actually represents the voices of the individual people in our country.
Camilla Zapata.
I absolutely agree that corporations are not people. The system has been corrupted by money and corporations and don't represent individual people, nor are they held accountable as people in a courtroom. Therefore, they do not deserve the treatment of being a person. I think we have a potential to return to a true democracy by moving towards this change. And things like Citizens United was a huge disappointment by our judicial system.
Thank you. Nick Matthews.
I absolutely support the We to Amend. There's no doubt about it. Our system is currently broken. The financing campaigns, it puts basically a lot of our public officials into the pocket of the corporations. It's ridiculous that there's not some system that is in place that limits the campaign financing to simply to individuals or that kind of thing. I know that I personally only accept donations from individuals. Corporations are not people. and they should not be treated like people. They are corporations. And I believe that there's definitely a lot of room there for reform in that situation. I completely support the we the wind. There's no doubt about it.
Stacy Atkins Salazar.
So we absolutely need political reform, and even just being part as a first-time candidate running for office, that's become really, really obvious just in trying to navigate through the system. It's a lot more complicated and convoluted than it should be, and it limits people that are able to run and want to lead. And corporations are not people. I think we've established that. And I too am not taking money from corporations on my campaign. It's the people that should be voting and their voice is heard. And there's just too much of a disparity of power between corporations and people. So I definitely value people over profits. And I think that we have to find a way to get money out of politics and a way to make it more fair and accessible to other people.
Thank you. Sarah Shafer.
Yes, I definitely, again, as everybody else has said, support the need to amend. I don't think that corporations are people, and I think for far too long in the US political system that money has played a huge role in getting people elected and getting people into power and having people keep power. And I think that we obviously need to move away from that and give more voice back to everyday citizens that are voting and that are involved in politics and want to get involved in politics. Yes, again, personally, I'm not accepting donations from corporations or businesses. I have fundraised for my campaign by going out, by talking to people, by reaching out via social media and talking to my friends and family. I am from this community and getting involved with people, not with corporations, not with the money that is behind them. And so I think on the local level, on the state level, and national level, we all need to stand up for, the First Amendment and our voices that we want to be heard, not, just have money talk instead. So thank you.
Thank you. Paul Patino.
Yeah, I support campaign finance reform in a real personal way. I don't take any money from anybody. I never have. I don't buy ads. I don't do signs. I really don't take endorsements, with the exception of the Green Party that I am part of, just to support them having a voice somewhere. I think one of the things we could do for campaign finance support reform is start with city council candidates don't have to pay for their ballot statements and translations. It's crazy that we have to do that. It should be free. And before I forget, I support Move to the We the People and the Move to Amend resolution, and I certainly would bring it forward for us to back and move onto as a city. Thanks.
All right. Colin Yeo.
Yeah, I fully support Move to Amend. I think that most of the problems that you see in our current political landscape are a direct result of living in essentially an oligarchy. I mean, let's face it, we are ruled by the wealthy in this country, and it's been getting progressively worse in my whole adult life. I don't know what that's ever going to look like in terms of change. I don't know if we're going to get that victory legislatively. Historically, it would suggest maybe no, that would not be the case. But yeah, it's absurd. My campaign slogan is people first. I believe in people over corporations or organizations. I'm only taking donations from individuals, and my entire platform has been built literally just on talking to people in Arcata, like what people want and what their concerns are. And I feel like more politicians perhaps ought to be doing that. Certainly it's not happening at a federal level whatsoever right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Orion Peterson Jones.
First, I want to say that I commend Paul for his efforts to actually avoid advertising and the use of signs, taking donations. I believe that I am actually the only candidate who is using entirely repurposed and recycled materials for my campaign. And I firmly believe that money in politics is toxic. the fact of the matter is that Arcata actually has a really rich history of deciding that corporations aren't people. We had Measure H in 2012, of which I was a staunch supporter, that basically said corporations are not natural persons. That was passed. We had Measure F in 1998, the Committee on Democracy and Corporations, that passed Ordinance 1333, which was the cap on formula restaurants in Arcata. And I think that's been wildly successful in maintaining Arcata's unique identity and keeping our money local. I think that's really important. So I would encourage more measures and ordinances of the same nature.
That's time. Thank you. And Kimberly White.
So corporations are not people. He who has or she has the most money wins, doesn't fly in my book. There's a conflict of interest if you're taking money from large corporations or politicians, then win by, they're being influenced by these large corporations. So I think in order to separate and keep the best interest of people and the planet, that money, big money, needs to stop corrupting or influencing on both sides of the aisle. I commend the grassroots that Paul is starting with regards to not accepting any money. I personally also am not accepting any large donations or corporate or large company campaign money. Yeah, he who has the most money wins is not working. I think that I like democracy dollars. So like every person would get $200 and they would use that money. And so that way, that would allow the people to be part of the democracy. What else can I say about that? So yeah.
Okay, and so we have reached the last question of the evening, which comes to us from 350 Humboldt.
My name is Haley Connors Keith, and I am representing 350 Humboldt. Our question is the following. To fight climate change, we need to decarbonize our electrical grid by building renewable energy infrastructure, such as offshore wind, transition, transportation, and buildings to an all-electric before 2045, and reduce the amount of driving that Humboldt County residents do. Doing this would create local green jobs and help employ people who have lost their jobs due to the pandemic. Will you pledge to build community support for these goals and work toward achieving them in an equitable way, guaranteeing green jobs for those that want them?
And we will start with Emily Grace Goldstein this time.
Yes, this is actually part of my platform, is building more sustainability into the infrastructure of our city of Arcata, looking at ways that we can expand green jobs, both for the environment's sake and for economic prosperity of the people in this town. Job creation is also really important. Every issue, I believe, can be looked at through an intersectional perspective, looking at it through multiple lenses. So I see creating green jobs as extremely important from multiple perspectives. And since we don't have a chance to do a closing statement, I believe, I just quickly wanted to say, I really want you all to reach out and talk with me. My website is emilyforarcata.com. It's EMILYFORARCATA.com. I've talked with thousands of you already. I want to keep those conversations going. My campaign is really built on the voice of the people. That's the whole point of me running. So please, please don't hesitate to reach out. I want to have conversations. Thank you so much for listening tonight.
All right, Camilla Zapata.
I definitely pledge to support building renewable energy and infrastructure and doing it in an equitable way. I think we really need this in our city and county, and the both of those two entities should work towards allocating grants and government funding to implement the large-scale offshore wind. I believe there's one in talks like 10 years out possibly, and I think that needs to try to be moved up and voted on and agreed upon earlier. The sooner the better. I believe incentivizing and implementing solar as it's becoming much cheaper. It's still relatively expensive, and it's not necessarily cost effective. and that you're saving a ton of money, but it is helping the environment, and eventually you work that time off or that amount of money off. I believe investing in our transit system and relatability of it to the community with better hours of operation, or expanding hours of operation, and reassessing transit lines in the coming years to work towards combating climate crisis.
Okay. Nick Matthews.
Yes, I'm definitely in support of green jobs and renewable energy. I believe that Humboldt in general is already in a transition stage for this. We all are aware that it needs to occur. Things have already been put into place, but they just didn't pass with the voters. Humboldt has so many wonderful opportunities for renewable resources, such as offshore wind. Humboldt's a prime location for this, and it'll also provide jobs, which are definitely needed as well right now. I support the airport microgrid. That would be a wonderful place to set up a bunch of solar panels, so forth. And also, I really feel that any buildings that are built in Arcata going forward should be green, buildings. They need to represent what we as a people believe, which is green energy moving forward. So yeah, I'm definitely in favor of that. I'm willing to work with RCEA and go forward with solar panels, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of room to move forward with this. There's no doubt about it. Thank you.
Stacy Atkins Salazar.
Well, I like the way that the question was phrased, because it's not just about promoting environmental change and responsibility, but also in creating and sustaining jobs. And I think that that really helps to sell the topic. Not that we have to or should have to sell the topic of being environmentally responsible, but let's face it, we have to sell it. There are people that have misconceptions. They think it's more expensive, not as reliable, or don't even believe in it. So we've got work to do. So I think being able to tie in jobs with that is a really cool way of looking at it, because we do need more jobs here, and we need more alternative, cleaner energy. So tying those two together, good idea.
Sarah Shafer.
I definitely support green jobs in Humboldt County, and I definitely support the idea of this Green New Deal on the national level. I think it's really important to not only our economy, but the national economy. We are currently living through a recession. We are entering, all-time unemployment rates and lows that are similar to what we experienced in the Great Depression. And how did we get out of that? With the New Deal, with creating jobs for people and creating necessary infrastructure to move our country forward. And that's kind of, we have the opportunity to invest right now in infrastructure such as offshore wind, such as solar, to be able to not only move our country forward environmentally and infrastructurally, but also get people back to work and create more jobs within our community and on the national level as well. So thank you.
Paul Patino.
Hi, yeah, I really support alternative energy. I have a little problem with the wind energy and the bird kill. Offshore wind, I'm a little concerned about the fishing and the effects on the animals that live in the ocean. I think the best bet for me is for us to build solar farms, build up a loan program so that we can solarize individuals' homes, especially of low and middle income, a real program that pays for most of it instead of just part of it. And we currently in the city are adding some electric car charging stations near the plaza, and I'm real happy that that's happening. And we are planning to purchase electric buses. And I wanted to thank Emily. For more information, paulpatino.com. Thank you.
Time. All right. Calling you.
Yeah, so I support not only investing in green technology, green industry in Arcata, but if you look at my website, yoforarcata.com, that's YEO for Arcata, FOR, arcata.com. I also believe in divesting from any sort of city funding, any sort of city investment from any of the big polluters, like any sort of carbon or fossil fuel companies. These are arguably the most destructive forces in the history of humankind, and we are facing the greatest existential threat that our species has probably ever faced. And the only thing that we can really do on a local level is push that stuff out and look to the future and see what we can do in terms of investment for greener technologies, car-free zones, mass transit, and not forget that there are people in rural Humboldt County who do need to drive into town. So accommodate for them as well. Thank you.
Ryan Peterson-Jones.
We really don't have much time left to address this issue. It's critically important to act now. The further costs of developing infrastructure are absolutely nothing when compared to global extinction. We need incentives for alternative transportation. I'm really happy to hear that the bus system is going electric. We also need more battery storage. We need to put a cap on energy consumption. I agree with Colin. I mean, it's important to be investing in alternative energies, wind, solar, hydroelectric, but ultimately we should also be talking about divesting from these companies that are climate damaging, and we should also be holding them accountable for pollution and destructive practices. Thank you.
Kimberly White.
So I just signed the pledge for 350 Humboldt, and I would encourage everyone to go to their website and do the same. I believe that revitalization of our community is dependent on creating more jobs. And while we create new jobs, we can do twofold. We can adjust the climate change. At the same time, we can start building a prosperous community and revitalization of the community. I agree with, as other candidates have pointed out, we definitely need to divest from these fossil fuel corporations that, sorry, Great Dane again. We need to divest from fossil fuel companies, and we need to transition doing this quickly. Also, we need to decarbonize new and existing buildings. We need to transition fuels in the electric generation and go towards renewable, locally produced energy. And I think that if we do these things, it's going to make our communities safer. We're going to be more prosperous. And, you know, coming out of COVID, I think it's essential that we move forward in creating jobs. And as I shared, we can do that simultaneously by adjusting or addressing climate chaos.
Okay. Michael Winkler. Oh, you're muted, Michael.
For the last 25 years, I consider myself one of the top leaders in sustainable energy in Humboldt County. And that's the reason why I was endorsed by National CR Club this year. That I've worked on more than 2,000 all solar powered, all electric apartments, low income apartments throughout California. On the Arcata City, I've been on the RCA board for many years, recently the chair of the board. And I also got the Arcata City Council to adopt resolutions to make Arcata all electric, phase out natural gas over 15 years throughout the city. We've already started converting heating systems in city buildings, including City Hall, to being all electric. All the electricity that we buy for the city of Arcata for our facilities are from renewable sources. And 20 years ago, I became a leader in electrifying everything in this county and modeled it all on computers. And so I just consider myself the leader in this, and I'm actually doing it. I'm really doing it, making it happen throughout California, throughout Arcata.
And that's the time. Thank you, Michael. And that concludes the forum for this evening. So I really want to thank once again all of you for coming. This was the largest of these that we've ever done. So thank you for participating in the experiment. Thank you for stepping up to run for city council and for participating in democracy in that way. This forum will be available on Access Humboldt, so I want to thank them for helping to facilitate the technology here. And we did have a couple of sponsors who didn't ask questions that I want to make sure to thank, but they helped to plan and execute and promote the Wiat Tribe, College of the Redwoods, and Club Triangle. Did not ask questions this evening, but we could not have done it without all of their help. So thank you all again and good luck.
We're off from broadcasting.
From Access Humboldt too? That's where we went wrong last time.